This video was sponsored by Bloomscape.
Hey, another month and another drink video, and this one is all about Scotch. I thought it'd be a good idea to do a three-part video series just about whiskey, because a lot of you guys have asked, hey Jason, what's your favorite kind of whiskey? And I don't think you understand how impossible of a question that is to answer, because there's so many types of whiskey. So I'm going to do a three-part series highlighting the three main types of whiskey, and we're starting this week with Scotch. And of course, at the end of the video, after I tell you all about Scotch, I'm going to show you how to make one of my all-time favorite Scotch-based drinks, the Rob Roy. Pretty dang delicious. So, follow along, subscribe down below, and enjoy the video. Now, before we can talk about Scotch, we got to define what Scotch actually is. Because all Scotch is whiskey, but not all whiskey is Scotch. So, in order for something to be called a Scotch, it's got to fall under certain criteria. Number one, it's got to be made of barley and water with selective other cereal grains. It has to be made, most importantly, in Scotland, and it's got to be aged for a minimum of 3 years in an oak barrel. Now this last one's not a requirement, but it is quite common practice. Most of the time it's a used oak barrel, either a used bourbon barrel or sherry barrel or some other type of used barrel. But that's not a legal requirement, it's just common practice. Now let's take a look at some of the different regions of Scotch and the different types of Scotch. Now, although Scotch has to be made in Scotland to be considered Scotch, it gets broken down even farther than that. Depending on who you talk to on any given day, there are either 5 or 6 unique regions in Scotland that produce Scotch. I say depending on who you talk to because, well, it's kind of a debatable topic. In 2009, there was 6 unique regions, but then they combined 2 of them and they shrunk it down to 5. But some people refuse to acknowledge that combination and they still go with 6. So 5 or 6, there's a handful of regions that make Scotch. I'm going to tell you about the 6 different regions because I refuse to believe there are only 5. So let's go through each region and each region's unique flavor profile, as well as what makes them special and delicious. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. There is a difference between single malt Scotch and blended Scotch. Single malt Scotch, we're talking about a single malted barrel of Scotch. What you put into the barrel is what you get out of the barrel, and that's that. Blended Scotch is a little different. That's where you're allowed to take Scotches from multiple different barrels and blend them together to try and create a more unique or desirable flavor. Single malt Scotch gets kind of a higher priority. People think it's fancier because, well, it's more expensive. And I do think that there's a certain art behind the distillation process in single malt that you don't get in blended Scotch, because what comes out is what you've got. So if you don't do a good job distilling it in the first place, well, you're not going to have a very good Scotch. But we'll get more into the whole blended versus single malt Scotch here in just a minute. Let's talk about the first region of Scotland we're going to visit today. The first region we're going to talk about today is Speyside. Now, Speyside is the largest Scotch producing region in all of Scotland. If you think of the different regions as cities, Speyside would be like New York City, densely populated with Scotch distilleries. In fact, over 50% of all the Scotch produced in Scotland comes from Speyside. Now you might be asking yourself, why? What makes Speyside so important? Remember how I told you there are 2 main ingredients in Scotch? Barley and water. Well, Speyside is situated at the confluence of a bunch of different freshwater rivers. So they have access to really good, clean water, which makes Speyside smooth and delicious. They don't use a ton of peat in the malting process, so you don't get a lot of smoke that you get from some of the other Scotch regions. It's known for more nutty, floral, fruity notes as you sip it. Some of the most popular distilleries in the Speyside region would be the Balvenie and Glenfiddich. Now, we're gonna sample some of the Balvenie and see how it tastes. This is the 14-year Caribbean cask, which means, remember how I said that lots of times they use used oak barrels? Well, for this, they're using used rum barrels. Delicious. This is what you would think of not as a super scotchy Scotch. It's not peaty, it's not smoky, it's sweet, it's nutty, just like a really good whiskey, but Scotch. The second region we're going to be talking about today is the Highland region. Now, although Speyside is the largest Scotch producing region in all of Scotland, Highland is the largest region in all of Scotland, meaning they take up the most space on the Scottish map geographically. And because you're dealing with such a large region, you got a wide array of different flavor profiles, depending on where you're getting your Scotch from. If you're getting it way up north by the sea, it might be more briny and smoky and peaty. If you're getting it farther south, it might be more silky and smooth and caramely. It just depends on where in the region you're getting your Scotch from. Two of my favorite distilleries within the Highland region are Bourbon and Glenmorangie. Glenmorangie is one of my favorite all-time Scotches. This is the Glenmorangie port cask, dealing with another used oak barrel here. This was a port barrel. They aged it 14 years. The Bourbon is the small cask version. So what this is they age it in a large cask for 3 years, which is required. Then they remove it and they finish it off in a small oak barrel, just to add a little more oaky flavor to it. You can see the color difference between these two Scotches. This one was aged for about 6 years and this for about 14. Well, for exactly 14, it says that on the box. So this has a very dark color and this is a little lighter. But let's taste them and see if we can taste the difference. Ooh, so this is very silky smooth, hardly any smoke in there whatsoever. The Bourbon, much more briny, smoky. You can taste a little peat in there. Both very good. Let's move to the next region. So moving on from the Highlands region, we enter the Lowlands. Now, if you're new to Scotch and you're still trying to develop a palate for it and you want a good place to start, I always point people towards Lowland Scotches because they are the easiest drinking Scotches, in my opinion, of all the regions. They're silky, they're smooth, they're caramely. The Lowlands region is located right above England, and so they just kind of have a very refined flavor quality. Two of my favorite distilleries in the Lowland region is the Glenkinchie and the Auchatosan. Both of them very good. The Glenkinchie is the one we are going to taste today. This is the 12-year. Ooh, love that sound. Gonna just pour a little in there. As you can see, this is a little on the lighter side. It's just a 12-year. But if I know anything about this distillery, it's gonna be sweet, smooth, and delicious. Oh, man, so smooth. Hardly any bite in the back of your throat. You get all of the Scotch flavor without kind of the punch in the face of any smokiness. Just a really good, easy drinking Scotch. So Lowlands, if you're curious, is a great place to start on your Scotch journey. Let's keep moving.
Now, a word from our sponsor. If you remember a few weeks ago, I got a beautiful box in the mail from Bloomscape. Bloomscape makes buying plants easy by delivering healthy plants to your door and setting you up with the tips and tricks you need to help your plants thrive. These aren't just any plants either. These are plants that have been cared for by plant experts and kept in optimal growing conditions in their greenhouses, where they are then shipped directly to you. If you check out their website, you'll find a wide variety of plants for both indoors and out, and they even have these awesome bloom kits that include a variety of young plants, tools, and supplies, along with care instructions to help keep them looking great. I got all my plants unboxed and planted. They showed up on my doorstep, and all I had to do was put them in the soil, which I also got from Bloomscape. They literally had everything I needed to get started, and as you can see, in just a few short weeks, my plants are growing like, well, plants, which is what they're supposed to do. Go to bloomscape.com or click the link in the video description and use my code, Bourbon Moth, for 20% off your first plant order of $100 or more.
I'm so excited because this next region is my favorite, hands down favorite region, and that's the Islay region. Named after the southernmost island on the west coast of Scotland, the Islay region produces some of the most delicious, flavorful Scotch you will ever taste in your life. But I should say, it's not for everybody. Some people say that Islay Scotches taste like you're drinking a campfire because they are smoky and peaty, and in my opinion, absolutely delicious. The reason they're so smoky is the way that they actually dry their malted barley. They put it on these drying floors that are perforated, and they light a big fire of peat underneath. All that smoke comes up through that perforated floor, and the smoke particles attach themselves to the barley, and that gives the smoky flavor through the whole distillation process. Some of my favorite distilleries in the Islay region are Laphroaig and Lagavulin. You've probably heard of Lagavulin. It was made very popular in the TV show Parks and Recreation because it was the preferred drink by Ron Swanson. So much so that the actor Nick Offerman has actually been working with Lagavulin, and just this last year produced his very own line of the Lagavulin Nick Offerman Special Scotch. So if you haven't tried an Islay Scotch before, be prepared to either love it or hate it, but one way or another, you should definitely give it a taste. This is the Laphroaig Triple Wood. It is a very smoky, peaty Scotch. But so good. I hate to move on. I want to stay right here, but we got 2 more regions to visit. Well, if I had to travel one place other than the Islay region of Scotland, I guess it would be the Highland region. Now, this is the region that I was telling you at the beginning is kind of debated on whether or not it's even a region anymore. It used to be, but in 2009, the Highland region was rolled into the Highland region, so technically all the island Scotches would be Highland Scotches. But there's so much diversity going on in the Highland region that I just can't bring myself to consider it anything but a region of its own. Some of my favorite distilleries in the Highland region are Highland Park and Talisker. The Highland Park 18, I hesitate to say this because I know some people might argue, is in my opinion the smoothest Scotch I have ever tasted in my entire life. It's not quite as smoky as an Islay region Scotch. It is just smooth. You get a very earthy flavor coming through with the peat and the brininess of the sea, and it is absolutely delicious. So, if you don't mind, I'm just gonna pour myself a little glass and have a little sip before we move on to our last and final region. Oh, that's good. Dang, that's good. As you can see, I don't have any bottles to taste or show you. The last region is Campbeltown. Now, Campbeltown used to be a thriving Scotch region in Scotland. They had at their heyday 50+ distilleries, but in the 1800s, havoc struck within the Scotch industry and that number plummeted. Only 3 distilleries survived that are around today. Those are Glengyle, Springbank, and Glen Scotia, if I remember correctly. But as hard as I tried, I couldn't find a single bottle from the Campbeltown region here in my little neck of the woods in Oregon. So unfortunately, I can't show you or really tell you anything about them. But I can drink some more of this Lefroy Triple Wood. The Campbeltown Scotches are known for their brininess. They're said to taste like wet wool and the sea. So if you find a bottle, check it out. I'd love to taste some myself. Now that I've taken you through all the different regions of Scotland and highlighted a few scotches from each one of those regions, I have to at least touch on the topic of blended Scotch. Now, blended Scotch differs from single malt Scotch in this. With a single malt Scotch, you take your malted barley, you make a mash, you distill it, you put it in a barrel, and then you put that into a bottle. What comes out of the barrel is what you get. But with blended Scotch, not so much. It still has to fall under the legal requirements of Scotch, meaning it's made of barley and water, it's aged for at least 3 years in an oak barrel, and of course, it's made in Scotland. But there's no law that says once it comes out of the barrel, it can't intermingle with different Scotches to try and create a more enhanced flavor profile. And that's exactly what blended Scotch is. It has no loyalty to region or type. The only thing that matters with blended Scotch is that you get a good end product. So blended Scotch might be from multiple distilleries, it might be from multiple regions, but the ultimate end product is just a good, smooth tasting Scotch. Some more popular distilleries or companies within the blended Scotch industry are Chivas Regal, Sheep Dip, and Johnnie Walker. Johnnie Walker seems to have one Scotch for every color of the rainbow. Blue Label is their more premium brand, starting at about $200 a bottle, all the way down to their Red Label, which you can pick up for $25. All of them are good, but if you ask me, my heart still lies with a single malt Scotch. Now, this wouldn't be a true drink video if I didn't show you how to, well, actually make a drink. I'll be honest, when I'm drinking Scotch, most of the time I'm just drinking it neat because I love the flavor that comes across in Scotch. But there are a few cocktails that are Scotch-based that I really, really love. One of the most iconic Scotch-based cocktails of all time is the Rob Roy. So I'm gonna show you how to make one real quick. It's pretty simple. Think of a Manhattan just with Scotch. So the first thing we're gonna do is take a Scotch. Now typically this is made with a blended Scotch, but I'm gonna switch it up a little and I'm gonna use this Highland Park 18 because it's freaking delicious. So you're gonna take your Highland Park 18 or whatever Scotch you choose and you're gonna measure out 2 ounces. Just like that. And you're gonna dump it into a tumbler. Then you're gonna take vermouth. Now, a traditional Rob Roy calls for sweet vermouth, but I like using dry vermouth. I think the dryness just adds a little bit to the drink. So you're gonna take a dry vermouth and you're gonna measure out 1 ounce of dry vermouth. Dump that in there as well. And then you're gonna take a few bitters and you're just gonna drop, 3 or 4 drops. Just like so. Then you're gonna take a handful of ice, add it into your tumbler, and you're gonna stir. Stir for about 20 seconds or so, just till it's really nice and cold. All right, then you are gonna take a strainer and I'm gonna take this little coupe glass here and you are gonna pour. Then last but not least, we're gonna take a lemon and we're just gonna trim off a little piece of the lemon rind and you're just going to impart some of that lemon rind essence. Get all those citrus oils down into the cup, just like that, and then drop it in. That is a classic Rob Roy. That's good. I think the reason I love the Rob Roy so much is it doesn't complicate it too much. You still have the Scotch coming through very nicely. You didn't add any sugar, so it's not overly sweet. You just get the citrus, you get a little bit of the bitters in there, the vermouth. It's just delicious. I could drink these all day. I hope you guys enjoyed that video. I hope it was interesting for you. Like I said, this is part number 1 in a 3-part series. Next time I'll do bourbon and then I'll do rye, both with a very interesting past, present, and future. And if there's a specific drink that you'd like to see more about or maybe learn how to make sure to comment down below and let me know, and I'll try and add it to the list. Until then, cheers.